All right, it's the Penn State Blitz. Long time no see,
Been a
Greg
while,
Pickel.
Bob.
I feel it's been ages.
It has been.
Have you got all your Christmas shopping done?
Yes.
I have not. All right, we got
One
four
day at a
downs.
time.
We got 4 downs to get to. Penn State football. You know, this past weekend, Army Navy, great game,
was a
great
great
scene in Philadelphia. I had Navy because I'm a Roger Staubach fan, so that wasn't great for me. But the reason I bring it up, it was a great weekend for Army Navy. It could also end up being a great weekend for James Franklin and Penn State.
Yep.
They had a lot of visitors on campus. Greg Pickel, as our recruiting guy, what did you learn? What were your thoughts on what James Franklin was able to do as we get closer to a magical day? How did they do on one of their final weekends?
Yeah, no question about it, Bob. I think that when you really break down what Penn State was able to do, they were able to really use the momentum they generally get in January, when the old signing
Right.
day is, or the traditional signing day, and moved it forward to December, when the new signing, or right before the new
Right.
signing period, which is December 20th to 22nd.
Mhm.
So they had 3 uncommitted guys on campus: 5-star Micah Parsons, 4-star defensive tackle Tyreek Smith, and another 4-star offensive tackle Rasheed Walker. They look to be in good shape with all 3 of them. It's hard to see Penn State as anything but the leader for those guys coming out of this visit. Of course, the key is, will they visit anywhere else? We know Micah Parsons will. He's going to visit Georgia this coming weekend. You always wonder if the last visit's going to change anything for guys.
Right.
Rasheed Walker could see some other schools, Tyreek Smith as well. So we'll see. I mean, those last 2 guys won't decide for a while. Micah Parsons decides, of course, December 20th on the new national, the start of the new national signing day
Right.
period. So we'll see. But the other 15 or 14, 15 commits that were on hand out of the 20 so far in the class of 2018. Good group on hand. Everything went well. And you're right. It was a good weekend for Penn State.
As a recruiting guy that's covered a lot of Penn State
Yeah.
recruiting the last few years, is it weird to kind of be this focused in December?
Yeah.
How do you think Penn State's handled it? Do you think they'll be doing some things different moving forward? Are you anxious to see how it plays out with regards to how many people sign? How's that going to work?
Yeah, I think that's the key right now is, will you get all of the currently 20 verbal commitments to sign? Is it going to be 15? Is it going to be 17? Or is it going to be all 20? I think that's the question at this point. I think Penn State feels pretty good about getting all 20. You're never sure, though, until it rolls in, because no one's ever experienced this before. We've seen JUCO guys sign
Right.
at this point in time. Paris Palmer is one of the guys that's kind of, because this is the JUCO window too, of course. So I think it's a lot of just waiting and seeing at this point. For Penn State staff, though, it's been quite an adjustment. I mean, usually, yes, they would go recruit in December, and maybe they'd have some kids on campus, but it never the intensity,
Right.
I guess you could say, that it is now, Bob. So I think that's the biggest difference these guys are having to deal with at this point. Of course, there'll be no, as Terry Smith said back in November, there'll be no lessening the load in January, though, because then it'll all just be 2019 kids and
Right.
whatever's left in 2018.
Okay, second down. There's still a football game for Penn State
There
to
is?
play. December 30th in the desert, Fiesta Bowl. I think it's Glendale, Arizona, ESPN, 4 o'clock. Since it's been announced, we've learned a couple of things. I wanted to run some things by you. Penn State opened as a slight favorite.
Right.
And also, I think it's worth noting that their defensive coordinator, Brent Pry, is still their defensive coordinator. That's
Right.
significant because I think there was some interest in Brent from another school.
Right. So we talked, well, I guess it was last week, that Louisiana Lafayette was reportedly trying to, sway Brent Pry to maybe take the job, or he was a candidate for the job. And then there was nothing else ever said about it. It was a 12-hour news cycle, if that. So, I mean, it looks good for Penn State as it relates to Brent Pry. There doesn't seem to be any concern out there at this point. Is that a guarantee? I don't know, Bob. But I think it is certainly notable at this point in time that Brent Pry, even if he was linked to that job,
Right.
doesn't seem to be going anywhere. Or if he is, he's no rush to do it, which I think is good news for Penn State.
Now, there is a Penn State Bowl Media Day coming up later this week.
Yep.
I think it's interesting because I think we're going to get a chance, hopefully, for a little Q&A with Penn State's new offensive coordinator, Ricky Ronnie. What are maybe 1 or 2 things on your mind, or, if you get a chance, because he's going to be swarmed.
No.
If you get a chance to pull up aside and say, yo, Rick, I got a question for you, what would that question be?
I think I'd just be mostly curious to know, well, it doesn't really matter, but is he going to stay upstairs or is he going to come down? I mean, remember Penn State, before Joe Moorhead, had all sorts of problems with John Donovan, whether he was going to stay upstairs, whether he was going to come down. Remember, it was a big deal.
Upstairs, downstairs.
They were moving Herb Hand around. They were moving Ricky Ronnie around. What are they going to do? I think they had a legitimate concern about that. Joe Moorhead took it out of play, but what do they do on that front? And then I think the other thing, too, is as it relates to the bowl game, is what's the focus on you know, I don't think they're going to ever concede snaps to get young guys in there, but this is a chance for Miles Sanders, Michael Bennett, and some other guys to really get some key reps. What will they do on that front? How will they distribute it, if there is any distribution? And the other thing, too, about Friday is that Phil Galliano, the new special teams coordinator, will chat as well.
Yeah. Boy, you mentioned John Donovan. 2015, boy, that was
like a long time
That
ago.
was quite a year, quite a season. 55-16 to close it out. I think the other thing with Ricky is, I don't know that he would talk about it, but there's the offense that you saw this past year, there's no way it's going to be 100% like that moving forward. I'm sure he's got some ideas. I'm sure he probably feels differently about maybe some of the personnel. Also, what will his working relationship be with somebody like Matt Linegrover? I feel like Joe and Matt were pretty close because they were Pittsburgh guys. I think that'll be interesting to see how he does that as well. And I want to know, people want to know, the fans want to know, when it's 4th and 1, will Trace McSorley get under center and run a quarterback sneak?
That's a great question.
Or are we still going to see him back there in the mesh point losing 2 yards?
Right.
I think it's fair. I think that's something that I am going to lobby for.
Yes.
I'm going to make it my platform for 2018. Put Trace under center. I want to see it.
Fullback? Yes or no?
That is no fullbacks. No fullbacks.
Okay.
That is second down. Third down also relates to recruiting and signing day itself. It is shaping up to be just a massive day, potentially, for Penn State with regard to the talent they're going to bring in, but also the in-state talent they could be landing. We've mentioned Micah Parsons. He has not announced yet, but there are a lot of schools that are still interested in him. For the fan base, just your thoughts on kind of where he is in the process and what signing day actually is going to be like for Penn State with regard to the in-state kids.
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll start with Parsons, and he's a guy, obviously, who's been at the top of the board for a long time, a top 5 prospect in the country, regardless of position. You know, he's going to go down to Georgia, and what will that change, if anything, for him? Will the last visit be the one to sway things? We'll have to wait and see. I know that Penn State made a big impression on him, and sometimes it's not always the last visit, it's the last big impression. Georgia has its work cut out for it in that regard, and then he's going to get ready and make a decision, sit down with his family, his coaches, so on and so forth. He said the other day that Georgia, Nebraska, Alabama, Penn State, and Oklahoma are the 5 in play. So we'll see how that plays out. And then as for the in-state kids, just in general, I mean, I think the thing that'll be fascinating about how all this plays out is that, what if you get 18 kids that sign and 2 say, nah, I'm going to wait? What happens? I mean, I don't, and you mentioned the in-state kids. It could be anyone. I think the in-state kids are good. Jesse Lucada, Nick Tarbert, and Shaquan Anderson, but so on and so forth. I think they're good with the Pennsylvania kids. The one thing I'll be curious about, Juice Scruggs being the other one, the one thing I'll be interested, though, to see, Bob, is what do they do if someone doesn't sign? It's one thing to say, okay, if you don't sign with us, we're going to treat it as a decommitment, and we'll see if we have a spot for you or not. It's another thing to say, well, it's a case-by-case basis, and maybe a kid has a reason to not sign, so we're going to treat him one way and treat a kid that we don't think has any reason to another way. So it's a feeling-out process, I think. I'm not sure if Penn State knows exactly how they want to go about it, but I think they would obviously hope that all 20 sign and they don't have to worry about it.
Well, as we tape this, I know that you are still a 5-star that's not committed.
That's right.
Do you want to leak anything for the fan base where you might be signing on December 20th?
I'm good. I'll be around the area. How about that?
All right. One last down, and maybe we'll get to some questions and comments. This isn't really necessarily about Penn State, but it affects Penn State.
Yes.
The name Shea Patterson, I think, could have an impact sooner rather than later on the Big Ten East race. Jim Harbaugh has been a busy guy in the offseason. It looks like he might have found another quarterback.
Yeah, and he also found a loophole. We'll get to that in a second. But a new loophole in the rules. But as it relates to Shea Patterson, there was no loophole there. He was given the ability to transfer, as was all of Ole Miss players, because of the sanctions levied against that program. So he was able to pick whatever school he wanted to, and Michigan was the pick for him. I think the question in my mind, more than what Shea Patterson means to Michigan next year, because I think he means a great deal. But does this mean none of those other quarterbacks on the roster are any good, or did Jim Harbaugh think that Shea Patterson, who's an incredibly talented kid, was just worth that you take a chance on him? And I think it's probably the latter. I don't think it's necessarily an indication that the McCaffrey kid or Brandon Peters or whoever else they have on that roster. I don't know. Wilton Spate's transferring, but
he's out.
He's gone. John O'Corn, I think, is too. So I don't know what they're going to do in Ann Arbor without those two. But anyway, is it an indication that they're not happy or confident about where the other guys are, or is it just you take a chance with Shea Patterson because Shea Patterson's on the market? I think it's the latter, and it'll make an impact next year.
Yeah, and so for the Penn State fans that haven't followed closely. It sounds like this situation with Ole Miss and the sanctions is a little bit like what happened with Penn State in 2012.
No bowl game either, right?
They were allowed. There were some players that were allowed to just leave the program and play elsewhere without sitting out here. Silas Redd, Anthony Farah, Justin Brown were the three big names that took advantage of that situation, and a lot of people are high on this Ole Miss quarterback. He's already proven himself, I think, in the SEC, and their odds are he will be able to compete and possibly play right away. For a Michigan team, that really, since he's been there, you look at his quarterbacks, Jake Ruddock, Wilton Spate, John O'Korn. It looked like they had started to get better with the Peters kid, but he got hurt. They have Ed McCaffrey's son, Christian McCaffrey's younger brother, I think his name's Dylan McCaffrey, coming off his red shirt. But when you're Harbaugh and Michigan and you're losing like they lost this past year, I think you want to do anything you can to kind of upgrade the QB talent base. And it would appear he's done that, and it'll be interesting to see what kind of effect this kid can have if he can play right away, and how it might shift things a little bit, maybe in the Big Ten East. We'll see. That's
interesting.
Yeah, that's 4 downs here.
Do we have questions
on the Penn State Blitz with Greg Pickel, who was on vacation last week, but he's back. Are there any questions and comments out there?
Yeah, we'll start with, Rob has 2, so actually there's two Robs who have 3 questions between them. So
I'm not good at math, man.
I'm not either. The first question is related to Tommy Stevens and whether he will stay or not. I mean, I get it. It's going to come up every opportunity it can. He's not going to address anything till after the bowl game. If he's staying, I mean, look, he's on the record as saying he graduates in the spring. So why would you leave before you graduate? And remember, grad transfer gives you the ability to do whatever you want. So why, if he's going to leave, which who knows if he is, but if he's going to, why wouldn't he wait till then?
Correct. Absolutely. Also, I think just worth pointing out, Saquon Barkley, I think, finished 4th in the Heisman, but he said, I think, during Heisman weekend that he will actually make his decision. Should I stay or should I go after the Fiesta Bowl?
Yeah, correct.
Let's point that out. Anything else?
Oh, yeah. We have a lot going on here. Who will replace Charles Huff as the next great recruiter? And that's a fair point. I mean, Charles Huff was a grinder on the recruiting trail. He really was. And he's like, it's one of the many reasons Joe Moore had targeted him to go with him to Mississippi State. I don't think there's any doubt about that. I think when you look at Penn State staff, it has a lot of good recruiters. So I don't know. I don't know if it's going to be one guy that steps up, but it does lead to another question, which is, what do you think that Penn State will look for in its next running backs coach? Mark Dupree, a graduate assistant, is coaching the position in the bowl game, and then they'll hire a 10th assistant, which every Big Ten or every FBS school can do starting January 8th. Are they looking for a guy with experience? Do you think the guy might be on the staff and they promote him? Keep in mind that Penn State's grown its quote-unquote consultation staff under James Franklin, much in the mold of Nick Saban in Alabama. You don't always know who those guys are, but perhaps one of those guys could jump in as well. It'll be interesting to see. Yeah,
what I want to see is whoever's going to be coaching the running backs, and Ricky Run is going to be the OC. I just think it's important moving forward. Let's just assume that Saquon Barkley is going to move on. Just for the sake of argument. Miles Sanders is obviously uniquely positioned to kind of take over for him. But I think that Penn State, as they move forward, they're going to have to continue to use the running back in the passing game. It was such a weapon with Barkley. He was such a unique talent. But I think Miles Sanders can really help them as a receiver as well. Barkley was almost led the team in receptions. He was a dynamic force. I just think whatever they're going to do with the running backs coach and however they're going to call the offense, I think you have to keep the running back involved in the passing game, because it's a difficult matchup for defenses, because almost invariably it's going to be a linebacker or possibly a safety, and you saw what Penn State was able to do with Barkley.
All right, let's see if we have any other questions here before we get going. Someone asked, let's be the last one, Bob. Somebody is curious if using what Ricky Ronnie did in the Tax Slayer Bowl is a good indicator of what his offense will be like at Penn State. I know how I feel about that. I will let you answer first.
Yeah, so the Tax Slayer Bowl was a bit of an odd game. When they went into it, Hackenberg was the quarterback, and they designed the offense around his strengths. He hurt his shoulder early in the game. Trace McSorley obviously didn't get a lot. He got some work in the practices leading up to, and Christian hadn't declared yet. So, I mean, the offense is really built around Hackenberg and his arm. So he gets hurt, and it takes McSorley a little while to get going, and it just looked like, I don't know, I felt to me like it was still it was just McSorley improvising and using what there was only so much adjusting you can do, and it was phenomenal to watch him in the fourth quarter, late in the third quarter, kind of get into a rhythm against I thought a good pass defense and put a scare into them. But I don't think what we saw in that game is going to be anything like what we're going to see with Ricky moving forward.
Yeah, that's where I'm at as well, Bob. I think that game is just completely different than what you would see. You're right. They built the offense a certain way. Were they able to get more of the idea of what the future offense would look like when Trace McSorley came in? Well, yeah, because they always wanted to run an offense like that. They just couldn't do it necessarily with Christian Hackenberg. But Ricky Ronnie's had 2 years to learn from Joe Moorhead. That's certainly going to help change and impact what he decides to do. So, yeah, I don't think it's really worth looking at that game tape at all.
All right, it's time to wrap up this edition of the Penn State Blitz. I hope you guys are getting your Christmas shopping done. Everyone have a happy holidays. And just remember, Trace McSorley under center in 2018. I'm starting the movement right now.